Thanks for joining us on Not Boring CEs, where we don't think you should be bored to death while getting your continuing ed. Keep listening here, then hop over to notboringces.com to get all your online CE credits. All right, y'all, let's get to learning. Michelle F. Mosley, pronouns she, her, is a licensed clinical mental health counselor in North Carolina. She has been working in the mental health field for almost 10 years and has been in private practice since 2019. She believes all people deserve respect, compassion, and access to mental and physical health care. Michelle specializes in working with survivors of religious trauma and spiritual abuse, and with those who are exiting a high-control religion. She also works with folks who are experiencing body image concerns, anxiety, grief, and life transitions. In addition to her clinical work, Michelle provides education about mental health for faith leaders and enjoys exploring all that North Carolina has to offer in her free time. In addition to individual therapy, Michelle facilitates a few groups each year. Body mindfulness offers a non-diet approach to helping participants reconnect with and heal their relationship with their body and food. Wounded by Faith helps folks who have been harmed within a religious context move forward in their journey with the support of others. Michelle also has trainings and consultations for other mental health professionals. Welcome, Michelle. Welcome back to Not Boring CEs. I'm your host, Allison Pereira. I'm here with Michelle Mosley, and we are going to be talking about the overlap between purity culture and diet culture. As an eating disorder therapist, I am very excited about this conversation, especially a eating disorder therapist in the Bible Belt. So thank you so much for being here, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited about this conversation as well.
Yeah. So get us started. What do we need to first start to understand about? Let's start with diet culture.
Yeah, I think first thing is just kind of understanding the terms that we're using. So when I talk about diet culture, I am referring to the myths, the promises that we are given around food and weight and body size and health that are all around us. And the ways that that creates this hierarchy related to appearance, where generally thin bodies, especially white thin bodies, are viewed as, quote, better. And so that's what I'm talking about when I talk about diet culture, and just all those messages that folks get from media, from social media, from the adults in their lives, even starting when they're children. Around body size and that type of thing.
Okay. Can we crack into diet culture a little bit? Because I'm thinking about the average American woman, let's say. I'm thinking about the average American therapist who isn't trained in this stuff, who's definitely heard the term diet culture, but maybe hasn't done their work around it or hasn't dug into it. Can we talk about some of those myths and just why they're myths?
Yeah, sure, definitely. I think a big one is the whole idea of calories in, calories out. That if a person is exerting themselves in a way to send out more calories than they're taking in, then automatically their body is going to be a smaller size. That's not true. Bodies are different. Bodies come in all shapes and sizes. Our bodies have a set point, a weight where they want to be. And they work darn hard to stay at that weight. Research has shown that between 95 and 98% of diets fail, that folks may initially lose some weight, and within 2 to 5 years, they've gained that back and often more. Because our bodies are working to keep us at that set point that they want us at. But the whole system is set up to make the person feel like a failure rather than, oh, this system is a failure. It's not taking into consideration my individual body and what my body needs.
Absolutely. And I think about the roles of the hormones ghrelin and leptin, and how when you don't eat enough, your hormones get out of whack and you start to hold on to things, you hold on to the fat because your body is protecting itself. It's doing exactly what it evolved to do.
Yes. And we don't honor those things, that our bodies evolved to survive.
Right. Because now survival for a lot of people, they conceptualize that as being the thinnest or
Yes.
being thin, period. That's what
Yeah.
feels like social survival for a lot of people.
Yes. And I completely understand that. I am a fat person and I use fat as a completely neutral descriptor. It's taken me a
Mhm.
long time to get to the point where I can utilize that as a neutral descriptor. And I can understand the appeal. There are aspects of navigating the world that are easier when you are in a smaller body.
Mhm.
You don't have to think about, will this seat hold me?
Mhm.
Can I comfortably go to the theater and sit in a seat, or go to a stadium and watch a sporting event and fit in the seat comfortably?
Mhm.
Don't have to worry about, getting an extender on an airplane, perhaps.
Mhm.
Um, you don't have to worry about folks looking at you and assuming things about your health,
Mhm.
including medical professionals who
Mhm.
assume whatever your issue is, if you lose weight, that will fix it.
Yeah.
When you're in a thinner body, those are things you don't necessarily have to think about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think as somebody in a thinner body who works with eating disorders and it has talked to so many clients, especially airplanes, like that is a lot of people are afraid of flying, but my clients in bigger bodies have a different reason that they're afraid of flying.
Mhm.
They're not afraid of crashing. They're afraid of like they happen to get the middle seat and the hateful looks from the people on either side of them, the asking for an extender, sometimes needing to remind somebody that they need an extender, and it feels humiliating.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Not being able to put down the tray table. And so maybe you get a drink or like the pretzels or whatever and you're kind
Mhm.
of trying to balance everything, all
Mhm.
of those things.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and there's an entire other CE about how weight and health are not correlated in the way we all assume. But can we do like a high level overview of that real quick for folks who may not
sure.
catch that one?
Yeah, yeah. So our American standard medical um, environment makes assumptions that health and weight are correlated, that and those trickle down into society.
Mhm.
I've had personal experiences with many providers that make assumptions about what your blood levels might be around things, your sugar levels, how much you move, what you eat, just by looking at my body,
Mhm.
without asking any questions around that. And so there really is these beliefs that if you look a certain way, and as I mentioned, it's that hierarchy, thinner bodies, quote, better bodies, that if you're thin, you're healthy.
Mhm.
If you're in a larger body, you're not healthy. And there's no consideration of, what does healthy mean?
Mhm.
Um, yes, health has to do with what kind of nutrition you're getting in. Are you moving your body? But it also has to do with, what's your mental health like?
Mhm.
What are your connections and your social interactions like? What is your job satisfaction like? There's all of these pieces that are part of health that you can't tell by looking at somebody.
Right, right. And our physical health, like if you're looking at labs and things like that, isn't correlated with weight either.
Right.
And that's like a juicy debate point I get into with a lot of people. But the data's on my side and I can
Hmm.
show that. And we'll do that in a whole other CE. But I do want that to be on the table as a part of this discussion, because this idea that um, health and weight are correlated is part of the justification that body shamers have for why they're body shaming,
Hmm.
and part of what fuels diet culture.
Yes, yes. You will so often see, I particularly try to follow a variety of bodies on social media, just so my feed is varied and I'm seeing real people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you will often see folks comment on larger creators, content creators,
Oh,
like, well, I just care about your health.
mm-hmm.
You don't know this person, you know nothing about their health.
Yeah.
Like, all you know is visually what they are presenting to you on their platform.
Mm-hmm. I have gotten to the point where I will not look at comments on the feeds of fat creators looking cute.
Mhm.
Like wearing anything that shows any skin or in any way showing themselves that doesn't indicate shame about their body. I've just gotten to the point where I'm like, I know what all these people are going to
Mm-hmm.
say. You're going to have a good number of people who are like, you're amazing, love that top, whatever. You're going to have some people in the middle saying, not even in the middle, they think they're being nice, but saying things like, you're so brave,
Yes,
which is so insulting.
it
Um,
is.
and
Like,
then you're
I'm
going
just
to have,
existing.
yeah, no, like I'm just wearing a shirt. And then you're going to have the people who are like, thanks for driving my health insurance premiums up and things like that. So,
Yes.
and I think every fat person who has shame about their body, or even not even a fat person, but people who have shame about their bodies, who sees those comments, it further drives that shame down into their soul.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It is another like, okay, well, that's why I shouldn't put myself out there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if I can handle that.
Yeah.
Um, and just as an aside, like, I will say that diversifying my social media feeds for me has been a game changer.
Yes.
Just seeing a variety of bodies in different shapes, different abilities, different colors, like
Mm-hmm.
just the reminder of like the whole world is not thin white women.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, and if your current feed on Instagram or TikTok, or if people are still scrolling Facebook, if your whole feed is like thin, young, white women, then I I wouldn't be surprised if that was impacting the way you feel about yourself.
mhm, yeah,
And that can leak onto clients too.
that can. Yeah.
Yeah. So diet culture basically says this is right. Whatever you are is wrong.
Mhm.
Like, because it includes basically everyone that's
Mhm.
not malnourished,
Mhm.
because there's no such thing as too thin in diet culture, which is dangerous for folks
Yes.
on so many levels. Um, it says this is right, everything else is wrong. Um, and I will say too, like the ideal is in there, and that is nearly impossible for 99% of the population. And that other 1% would probably still need to have some sort of plastic surgery tweaks to get there.
Mhm.
So we're all taught to strive for this impossible thing that we cognitively know isn't possible.
Yeah.
Like we know it. And we also cognitively know deep down, like it doesn't really matter, but damn, it feels like it matters.
Yes. Yes, it does. Yeah. And I think it's so important what you said that there is nobody that naturally fits the ideal. Like
Yeah.
the whole diet industry is built on there is something more, there is
Hmm.
something better, there's still something for you to strive for.
Right.
So
And
regardless of how you change your body or what you try to do, they're going to put something else out there for you to reach for.
absolutely. I mean, even if you just look at the trends, like when I was a teenager, it was Kate Moss, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then later on, we hit the Kardashians, and now the Kardashians are looking more like Kate Moss. Like
Yeah.
it ebbs and flows, and like maybe your body as it is somewhere in that process. Like maybe there's like a year or two where you've got the on trend body, but don't get too attached to that.
Mm-hmm.
If like being on trend is what's feeling really good, if you're getting a lot of validation from that, because
Yeah.
soon your ass is going to be too big, or you're too fit, like you're too muscly or whatever.
Yeah.
It shifts.
And
uh
not only does the trend shift, our body shift.
yes,
And so there's
yes,
no room for that in diet culture for the fact that, your body at 35 shouldn't and won't look like it did at 18.
yeah, yeah. And it's interesting as a woman in my 40s, like having these conversations with my friends just about our changing bodies. And
Mm-hmm.
like friends are pretty like enlightened folks. We're all trying to like be loving and accepting around these changes. And it's hard. So I also want to impress upon people that like I've been an eating disorder therapist for 20 years. Like this shit sinks into me too.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think that is so important
Yeah.
that I feel like we will always be doing the work around
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
in our own lives. So as therapists, we can help other folks in their work.
Absolutely. And I'll say, like, 20 years ago in the eating disorder field, you weren't allowed to insinuate that you weren't 100% in love with your body. There was
Mm.
a lot of shame in the field around, like this idea that you had to have it all together to be able to help anyone.
Mm-hmm.
You can be dissatisfied with parts of your body or your body as a whole, and be working on acceptance. We don't have to love it, but be
Mm-hmm.
working on, like, this is my body, and
Yep.
still help other people in that same process.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think 20 years ago, we, in the eating disorder field, like, we were all just faking how in love with our bodies we were, which isn't
Yeah.
authentic and doesn't, I think it also gives a false goal to our clients.
Mm-hmm. I was just thinking that
Yeah.
for folks coming in and thinking, well, my therapist, you know, is completely in love with their body, so that's the goal. And if I don't get there, then that's another way I've failed.
Right. Exactly. And then why bother? If I can't seem to
Mm-hmm.
get there, I'm just going to give into the behaviors that might help me eventually, if I get thin enough,
Yeah. Yeah.
pull me into this magical satisfaction with self.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's talk some about purity culture. Can you define
Okay.
that for us?
Sure. So purity culture, that phrase is often used to describe a subculture within evangelical Christianity.
Mhm.
Um, the concepts of purity culture are present in a lot of fundamentalist or high control religious groups. They may not always call them purity culture, but basically, there's a lot of teachings around strict gender norms and roles, very much a gender binary. There
Mhm.
is, male and female. This is what males do, this is what females do. Um, there's a lot of focus on modesty, particularly for women.
Mhm.
Covering your body, um, being pure, being virginal, big focus on the concept of virginity,
Mhm.
and quote, saving that for marriage. Um, a lot of purity culture is kind of built on the idea that, especially as a woman, as a girl, you belong to your father until you are given to your husband. That is an aspect of it. Um, Focus on abstinence outside of heterosexual marriage.
Mhm.
Um, and there's a lot of ways that it also sets up that there's no room for typical development. Like we were talking about your body's changing and developing and how diet culture doesn't allow for that. Well, purity culture doesn't allow for that. More on like the sexuality, figuring out who I am, what do I want in relationships, doesn't really leave room for that type of development.
Mhm. Yeah, I think about so I like our kids, my partner and I's kids, to be exposed to all sorts of different cultural experiences. I was not raised religious. We're not raising them religiously. We all love musicals, and they're like, "Oh, there's a new musical on Netflix. It's about a summer camp." And I'm like, "Sweet, let's get it going." And it was all about this Christian summer camp. And I'm fine with all of it until the scene where they're all in the lake and they're wearing, like, the boys or men are all wearing like t-shirts and long trunks, and the girls are all wearing one pieces with shorts on top of them, and they're all sopping wet in the lake. And I was like, no, in my head.
Yes.
And just realizing, like, it was the purity culture around that really got under my skin. Of course, everyone in the movie is then, but it was just like, it's okay to wear a bikini. Like, you're 17, allegedly.
Yes.
Like, it's okay you're a boy. Like, you don't have to be weighed down by a t-shirt in the
Yeah.
lake. And my kids were like, why are they all wearing weird bathing suits? And I was like,
That's so funny.
I find it so intriguing that you noticed that. I was actually having a reaction to that myself. It doesn't look very comfortable, does it?
Yes, yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
And there are a lot, I mean, that's just one of the ways that it plays out.
Hmm.
And I've seen a lot of times where boys may be allowed to wear more typical, just swim trunks,
Hmm.
not expected to wear a shirt.
Hmm.
Whereas the girls, it's like it must be a one piece. You may also need to wear a t-shirt over it.
Hmm.
Um, there's often a lot of expectation put on girls and women. to keep your body covered, and that you are responsible if someone has, quote, impure thoughts about your body. Like you don't
Yes.
want to, often it'll be said, you don't want to cause your brother to stumble, or you don't want to be the reason somebody else is lusting. Um, and I was a teenager in the 90s. The True Love Waits movement was huge. And for folks that may not know what that is basically this whole movement that encouraged teenagers to stay abstinent. They would say save sex for marriage. Of course, marriage is going to be heterosexual union between one man and one woman. Folks would sign pledges that, I'm going to save myself for marriage. You might be 12 and you're making this pledge.
Right.
A lot of people would have like rings or some type of jewelry that I'm going to wear this and it's my reminder. And if someone chooses to do that, that's great. However, the way that it was presented then, there was no option for, okay, well, here is some accurate sex education.
Right.
And these are things that you may want to explore. Here are ways to do that in a way that is safe, that is healthy. And so, I think there's a lot of adults now that were affected by that piece of purity culture.
Absolutely. It's funny because I think I signed that pledge. I wasn't raised religious, but I was at like a friend's church for a thing. And I'm like, oh, we're signing stuff. Yeah, sure. I'll sign on for that. Yeah, because you
Right.
take it seriously,
Yeah.
but everybody was signing it. There was such
Yes.
a peer pressure vibe to it that like, if I hadn't signed it, I would have looked like some sort of slut muffin. I don't know. Like
Right.
it would have been
Yes.
like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
So yeah, I still remember like it was in some church gym. I think there was a dance or something with black lights that I was excited about in middle school or something.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, yeah. And so I was excited about dancing. But I first needed to pledge my virginity.
Right. Yes.
So,
And for
and like,
some people, it was an experience of like, oh, I signed this thing because everybody else was signing the thing. And it didn't really leave a big impact. And for other people, like either they signed something and it was a huge impact just because of the way they interpret things. And so there might be shame and guilt for them years later, or it was such a huge part of the culture that they were in. That kind of like diet culture is just the water that we swim in.
right.
For a lot of folks who are in fundamentalist or high control religions, purity culture is the water you're swimming in.
Yeah. Yeah. Even when you're no longer in it, I've worked with so many people who are like a decade out from the last time they went to church, but there's still that shame.
Yes. Yeah.
And that lack of freedom around sex that they wish that they had.
Yes.
And the being able to let go during sex.
Yes.
Because they're so worried that like even if they don't believe in hell, but what if there is a hell? Like that old programming.
Yeah, folks in their 30s, 40s, 50s that are still, they don't really know what they'd like. They're afraid to explore their sexuality or pleasure. They've never had an enjoyable sexual experience because of the like not being able to let go or feeling like, is this wrong? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think about that, the combo of not having like a good sexual experience in your life, like having sexual experiences, but they're not good. And deep down wondering if those not great experiences are going to damn you for eternity. What an awful combo.
Yes.
Like definitely not worth it.
Yeah. So much shame and fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk some about how these cultures overlap. Because these are really like the impact of these. I think there's impact that overlaps and these cultures overlap also. So let's dive into that.
Yeah. One big overlap that comes to mind for me is just how they both create these hierarchies of appearance or hierarchies of judgment. We kind of talked about that with diet culture of where the ideal is thin, often a thin white woman, a thin young white woman. And so folks are constantly judging other people and judging themselves. That same hierarchy of appearance and judgment happens in purity culture. There is definitely still a hierarchy of appearance. Many folks that have probably been in, particularly in evangelical Christian churches, will know about the "here's my smoking hot wife" phenomenon. Lots of pastors, that is how they introduce their wife. And so it gives you this
Oh,
message that like appearance is the thing that matters. My wife
right.
is here to look beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And that is her sole purpose.
Mm-hmm.
But she's supposed to look beautiful and modest at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this hierarchy of, okay, do my clothes cover enough of my body? Am I acting in the appropriate way? Am I fulfilling my role that was assigned based on gender constructs?
Mm-hmm.
And binary gender constructs. Again, I often speak of binaries when I talk about in fundamentalist or high control religions, because generally gender is completely viewed in a binary there,
Mm-hmm.
even though we know that that is not true.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the world you're in. So there's these hierarchies of judgment about yourself and others, and you're always trying to, okay, well, where do I fit? You know,
Mm-hmm.
my body is smaller or bigger than theirs. My clothing is more or less modest than theirs. I kept my, promise about abstinence longer than they did.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way that they intersect. Both can foster the belief that pleasure is bad. In diet culture, we're thinking about any kind of pleasure around food, enjoying your food, connecting with your culture or celebrations through food. That can be viewed as bad because food shouldn't be pleasurable. It's just fuel.
Mm-hmm.
And then with purity culture, like we were saying, lots of folks have never had an enjoyable sexual experience. They've never had the freedom to even explore their own bodies and discover, like, hey, this feels good. This doesn't feel so good. Because that kind of pleasure is bad. There's messages that sex is meant for procreation. If I'm not having sex in a heterosexual marriage with the intent of having a child, then there's no place for it. It can't just be something that's fun and pleasurable.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's another way that they overlap for folks. Um, I think both cause us to be disconnected from our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
When you're not allowing pleasure and you're trying to cut that off, you cut off connection.
Mm-hmm.
And so you may not be aware when you're feeling hungry, or thirsty, when your body wants to move, when you're attracted to somebody, when clothing doesn't feel good. Like your example of swimming with all these clothes on, that doesn't feel good.
No, nobody enjoys that.
No, but you're completely disconnected. Like you don't even recognize that, oh, this is like really literally weighing me down. This is
Mm-hmm.
not fun. Because you're just, okay, well, the rule is that I have to wear this. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I've heard multiple people describe the feeling of that they're a head floating around.
Mm-hmm.
Like they just live in their head and there's no connection with their body. And this is both for folks who been very affected by diet culture, may have some disordered eating or an eating disorder, as well as folks that have been very affected by purity culture,
Mm-hmm.
or both. Um,
Yeah.
just that complete disconnection of, oh yeah, I live in my body, and it gives me important information.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then a fourth one that I thought about is that both diet culture and purity culture use morals-based language.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so with diet culture, things like, quote, clean eating,
Mm-hmm.
or junk food. We're putting morality on food. And we know if we've done any deep dive into things, like food is food and all food fits. And it's important to get a variety of nutrition over time. But food is not dirty unless you dropped it on the floor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, and the same kind of morals-based language within purity culture, of just the fact of things being pure, clean, virginal. And if you don't fit in those categories, like the opposite is that you're sinful or you're dirty, or you're a slut. Um, so putting a lot of morality-based language around things that really does create that dichotomy of what's quote good and what's quote bad.
Yeah. I think about too, like the our type A folks, our perfectionistic folks. And there's a right and a wrong with that goes along with what you're saying in each
Mm-hmm.
culture, and how, like, as a type A, I want to do things the right way. I want to, like, I know I can if I work hard enough. So there's also a worthiness and a sense of self that gets really wrapped up into doing those things right, the
Yes.
way they've been laid out for us. And then it's harder to pry diet culture and purity culture out of them because it's so wrapped up in their identity.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are so many folks that give me the rules. What is the right thing to do? What is the wrong thing to do? And when I
Mm-hmm.
have those clear-cut rules, then I know where I stand.
Yeah.
Um, you
Yeah.
know, and so if you start exploring that there might be a gray area, like that's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for our brains, it's hard for our bodies to sit in that. You mean there's not a clear cut right or wrong? Do this,
Yeah.
don't do this.
Yeah. And I think for people who aren't, like, they don't know a lot about how eating disorder therapists work, or how diet culture and eating disorder treatment are, like, enemies. Um, like, in eating disorder treatment, we're not like, okay, here is your meal plan to follow to the hilt. If somebody needs refeeding, if they're underweight, and in order to be, like, healthy walking around, we might say, like, we want you to hit this so that you can get to a weight that is stable.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're not saying that. Their dietitians are, because that's beyond our scope, but we'll support them. But most of the time it's about learning to listen to your body's cues,
Mm-hmm.
learning to listen to your hunger and your satiety and your cravings, which I would say almost everybody has been divorced from.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like it's a relearning for everybody. It's not just my clients with disordered eating or eating disorders. And it's something I have to tune into too, having done this for 20 years and feeling like, oh yeah, I'm an intuitive eater. Like, I really pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'm like, when was the last time I really checked in? Like, this
Yeah.
is, and we can check in and be like, yeah, I'm satisfied, but these nachos are freaking good. I'm going to eat some more. And that's an active
Mm-hmm.
choice, but there's an awareness to that choice instead of being dragged into a binge that you're not, conscious with.
Yes.
So it doesn't mean if you're an intuitive eater, or if you are recovered or recovering from an eating disorder, that you don't emotionally overeat sometimes, that you don't just eat for pleasure sometimes. Um, those things are an important part of learning how to have a normal relationship with food.
Yes. Yeah. And that aspect of like checking in with yourself and making the conscious choice,
Mm-hmm.
like I even as you were saying that, I was thinking about kind of an example, in more of the purity culture realm, that a lot of teaching in purity culture, especially toward women, excuse me, especially toward women, will be, that you are to be available for sex for your husband whenever he wants it. It's not a conscious choice. You don't check in with yourself. It's
Mm-hmm.
just kind of, I am here.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a a healthier version of that, where you are checking in with yourself, could be, my partner's a little bit more interested in sex or some type of intimacy right now than I am. But I'm going to check in and I'm okay with it. And this is something that I want to share with my partner right now. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not coerced. It's not, this is something that I have to do. It's
Mm-hmm.
okay. I'm checking in with myself. I feel okay about this. Like, this is a way
Yeah.
that I feel okay with caring for my partner at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. From the outside, same result, but the internal
Mm-hmm.
experience is vastly different.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And I'm thinking too about how sometimes, like, in my practice, I've had the experience of like eating disorder recovery being almost stymied by purity culture. I had an amazing client who was Mormon, and I would say on like the more conservative end of Mormon,
Mm-hmm.
who had never worn a skirt without hose or tights, who always wore long sleeves. Like we're talking very, very modest.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and part of that was infused with her own body shame. So it was a good way of feeling hidden and like she wasn't having to show skin at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we were working on body image things, there would be some things like, well, what if, you know, the skirt you're wearing tomorrow, you said is going to go below your knees. What if you didn't wear hose? How would that feel? And she was like, well, I don't want to be responsible for people having lustful thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be like, having to challenge whether or not that was really it, or if it was like, I'm really scared of the way that's going to feel for me.
Yeah.
And having to like, I don't want to challenge somebody's religious belief. She was devout. She loved her religion. It was a source of strength in so many ways for her.
Mm-hmm.
But I also had to ask every time, like, not in these words, but like, is this an excuse to not do some work that scares you? Or is this truly what you feel is an important part of your religion? And like
Yeah.
we had the kind of relationship where we could have that conversation pretty openly once we'd been working together for a while. And there were times when sometimes it was an excuse and she'd cop to that. And there were times when she was like, no, here's why it's really important to me. And so that allowed that kind of pause and internal check for her that we
Mm-hmm.
were just talking about, checking in internally to where she got to a point where she could ask herself that without it needing to come externally from me.
Yeah, yeah, that is so powerful. And to
Yeah.
recognize that there may be times I would imagine for her that I'm not really sure which it is.
Yeah.
It can might be
Yeah.
part of both.
Absolutely. And I mean, I know for myself, I make all sorts of excuses and then don't realize it until I check
Mhm.
in. But it feels very legit in the moment, you know,
Yes.
like we all do it. Um, so yeah, and I want to talk too about like honoring religion while not buying into purity culture. Like, how do we do that? Because that's tricky.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I work with folks that are kind of everywhere related to their religion. I work with a lot of folks who have had some harmful experiences within religion, um, but some of them very much are committed to their beliefs and they want to, for that to still be part of their lives, all the way to folks that are like, no, like kind of burn it all down. Like, I'm
Hmm.
done with that. And so it can look a little bit different depending on where a person is
Hmm.
religiously, but for folks that very much still that is a part of their life, they find strength in there. There's many ways that their religious beliefs are helpful,
Hmm.
but there's ways that aspects of purity culture um, may be harmful or holding them back from making the progress or the growth that they want to. Like some of what you were saying with your client of like challenging, like, okay, where is this belief coming from?
Hmm.
Is this helpful? Um, are there possible other ways that this could be interpreted or applied to your life?
Hmm.
Um, you know, and it really can be a long process of exploring depending on how long purity culture and those types of teachings have been a part of their life, and depending on where they are in their
Hmm.
life. If somebody has a partner and that partner is open to exploring maybe some different ways to view sexuality or some different ways to have pleasure, um, then that can look very different than somebody who, I made this commitment when I was 14, 15 that I was, not going to have sex till marriage, but now I'm 35 or 40 and I'm not married. And so I'm not sure what to do with this. Like
Hmm.
almost a feeling of, am I allowed to now have sex? Because, maybe they're in a monogamous relationship or a committed relationship and that's something they want to explore, but there's still this piece that's like, but is that allowed? And so
Hmm.
it's going to look very different as far as how I explore that with them. But really questioning and leaving room for them to explore without judgment. Like, let's be
Mhm.
curious about, what would this be like? What would it be like if you did decide to have sex with this person? Is there a type of intimacy that feels a little less risky than another type? Maybe you want to explore that first.
Mhm.
Um, and just not trying to rush the process.
Yeah. When I'm thinking about my clients who were raised in purity culture and are still a part of it, even talking about these things feels shameful and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's, as therapists, we talk about this stuff all the time. And we're so comfortable with those conversations in a way that like I've brought it up before with a client who was entrenched in purity culture. And it was like I don't even know, shot their dog or something. Like it was so jarring to them
Yeah.
in a way that like I wasn't as aware as I should have been of the impact of even just bringing up sex clinically.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something like, don't do what I did, y'all, because the look on her face when I don't even remember what I brought up, but it was like it was something that it was like it had never been said out loud in front of her
Mm-hmm.
before. Um,
And it probably
so,
hadn't.
right.
You know, like to speak freely about sex, to use anatomically correct terms,
Hmm.
to say the word masturbation,
Hmm.
like, those really can be jarring.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and I mean, I know from my own experience, I had experience in purity culture and kind of going through the process of being at a place now where like, okay, well, we can talk about sex and like we can talk about masturbation.
Mhm.
It's okay to say penis or clitoris or whatever it might be that we're talking about,
Mhm.
and to follow along where the client is. So if they need to speak about it in another way for a while to
Mhm.
just kind of feel comfortable even broaching the topic, okay, we can do that.
Yeah.
And as therapists, we can kind of be on that leading edge of, okay, let's see, what is it like to use this term?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, it's interesting too of like my own flexibility around like the client I was talking about earlier with the pantyhose with everything. There was so much shame around sex. She was single. She was never going to have sex before marriage. Like I'm pretty sure unless something big changed, she probably held
mhm,
to that. Um, she was dating. She was very interested, and it's dating within her faith, so there wasn't pressure. Um, but she felt fine with masturbation. And that was like, I couldn't reconcile initially, like, but isn't that just as bad in purity culture? Like, I couldn't, but I was like, whatever, I'll take whatever win she can get. I'm
yeah,
glad that she's having some pleasure. And that's something that she can then show her future husband, hopefully, in order to continue that pleasure with him. Um,
yes,
but just my own like cognitive flexibility around what I think purity culture is and how I think it's defined and what's allowed and what's not. Like we really do have to listen to our clients about
yes.
their experience of that.
That is so important. Even when we think we know what purity culture is, like I try to be very aware of asking clients, like, what does that mean for you? Like, how did that play out in your experience? Because you're
Mhm.
right, for some people, like masturbation would be totally off the table. We
Yeah.
don't do that. Like, that is cheating on our future spouse. Like, that's, you know, and it sounds like that was not the experience for this client. Like,
Yeah.
masturbation was an acceptable form of sexual expression and a way for her to experience pleasure.
Hmm.
And you never know that if you don't broach the subject, if you just make
Right.
assumptions of, well, purity culture means this. You were taught XYZ and this is what it means for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was counterculture for her. Like it wasn't like it was acceptable in her circles. It's like she made an exception,
Mm-hmm.
which to me was like, what other exceptions can you make? Like, how can we expand this to help you like love your body more, to help you not feel so much shame 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so can we kind of get into some nitty-gritty of how to work with folks with purity culture and diet culture? Like, I feel like we've touched on some. Are there some big pieces that we're missing or just that we need to talk about?
Yeah. Um, so I think one big piece is kind of the ways it can show up for somebody. Because very often, I mean, very rarely, every once in a while this will happen, but very rarely does somebody come in and be like, I'm experiencing the impact of diet culture and purity culture.
Right,
You
right.
know? And so being aware of that, like how things might come up as they're talking, and some of the things that can present. So, like we talked about that disconnection from yourself, kind of feeling like this floating head, not being able to connect with when you're hungry, when you're thirsty, when you have any kind of desire, or feeling like any sexual desire is bad, like just kind of trying to numb it or turn it off. That's one thing we can be looking for. That shame for things that are very typical and developmentally appropriate. Experiences, desires, emotions, like, we as therapists, we know something about development and like, okay, when people are typically experiencing things. So, you have an adolescent who is sexually curious. Okay, well, that is developmentally appropriate. Like, and so just being aware of the shame that can arise around these things that are very part of typical development. Noticing sometimes depression can set in because folks feel like they're not measuring up, whether that's with their body, or living up to those kind of modesty rules. And so if somebody's presenting with some symptoms of depression, feeling like a failure, or feeling really disconnected from folks, feeling really hopeless, doing a little bit of investigating of what might be in play there, particularly if from their background that there's been some struggles around any kind of disordered eating, or they came out of a fundamentalist or high control religious background. Just something to kind of pay attention to. And then I think another way, I'm not sure if I mentioned this earlier, but another way that purity culture and diet culture can kind of intersect to impact somebody is a person can feel a lack of control because of this purity culture and all of these rules that are put on them. But they may feel like the thing I can control is my food, or my body. And so I can control how much I eat, or what I eat, or how often I move my body. And so paying attention to that coming up as well. If somebody is feeling like this complete lack of control, and what are they doing to try to find some control in their life?
Right. Well, and I think about how, like, the converse of that too is like the lack of control. Maybe they're controlling about everything else in their life, but then they can't control food is how it feels. And so they're overeating, they're binging, they're doing things that which I think is if there were a hierarchy of eating disorders, right? It's the folks who binge eat who feel the most shame about their eating disorder. It feels like they're in residential treatment. It's always like, oh, I feel for them when they first come in because they think everybody's going to judge them and think them so different.
Yes. Yeah.
But like everything else feels so in control except this one thing. And it's the one thing that their two cultures are saying, like, this is the absolute thing you should have control about. I don't care if you're making straight A's. You are not thin enough. You are not good enough. You are having sexual thoughts and feelings that are sinful. Like, oh,
yeah. Like your body is out of control. Get it under control.
Right. There's too much. It's too much.
Yes. Oh, yes. I think that is so common, that folks get all of these messages that something about you is too much. And it's kind of interesting how that can morph into I'm not enough. I've gotten all these messages that I'm too much, but internally I'm not enough. And I have a lot of shame about that.
Yeah.
So those are just some of the things as therapists we can kind of be on the lookout for. Some of the things that I have found to be helpful is bringing somatic practices into therapy. I feel like you do have to be cautious of what you bring in and how quickly you bring those things in.
Mm-hmm.
Because for someone who is very disconnected from their body, those practices can be almost traumatizing in a
Mm-hmm.
way. If you're suddenly asking somebody to, okay, we're going to take, 20 minutes and we're going to reconnect and be in your body. It might be starting with, okay, we're going to take a minute and just notice our breathing.
Mm-hmm.
So starting slow and kind of seeing like, what is that like for this person?
Yeah, because for most of these clients, being in your body is dangerous. Like it feels
Yes,
dangerous. It feels
yes.
risky because the body's not to be trusted. It's betraying you.
Yes, exactly. And so being aware of that and approaching bringing those somatic experiences with curiosity of like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to try something and we're just going to see how it feels. And
Mm-hmm.
if it feels really bad, like just say stop and we will stop. You are in control of this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think it can be really helpful to bring those things in as a way to reconnect
Mm-hmm.
with your body. And so common things I'll do are, focusing on breathing. I like to do like a mindful eating exercise, if that feels appropriate with a person of just, having something that you enjoy, maybe a piece of chocolate or some type of snack. And we're actually going to pay attention to the experience of eating this food,
Mm-hmm.
take it in with our senses. What does it smell like? What's the weight of it? What does it feel like in your hand? Like when you put it in your mouth, not that immediate, I'm going to chew this and swallow it and it's gone, but I'm going to experience what it is like to have this in my mouth, and to enjoy that and notice like what's the reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So those are just some ways that you can explore connecting
Mm-hmm.
with the body. And those are also things that you can teach clients in session and they can do them outside of session,
Mm-hmm.
to check in. Um, Another one is noticing, like if I have a client that likes to go for walks or walks their dog every day, well, notice what it feels like as you're, moving one leg and then the other, as your feet hit the ground. Just
Mm-hmm.
paying attention to an experience in your body. Um, so bringing that in with ease.
Yeah.
Um, I think we kind of touched on this, but like coming alongside folks to help them examine and possibly deconstruct unhelpful beliefs, things
Mm-hmm.
that are not helpful for them. It's not our role to tell somebody what to believe, or to try to change their beliefs. But when we notice folks saying, like, I have this belief and it's causing me problems in this way, and they probably won't say it that clearly.
Mm-hmm.
But when we pick that up, like being available as kind of a sounding board to help challenge that,
Yeah.
um, and be supportive if they're like, I don't know if I want to believe this anymore, or if I want to practice it in this way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, what feels like a safe way to explore that? Um, uh, I think psychoeducation has been really important, like um, talking about diet culture, talking about the impacts of purity culture, um, talking about what is typical development, really kind of normalizing some of the things. Because I've had folks come in that, maybe they might be in their early 30s or even older, and they're like, I just feel like I'm lusting and using a lot of that language. And then when we talk about it more, they never really got to go through the typical developmental stages of exploring relationships and figuring out who they're attracted to, and what they might want a relationship to look like. And so they're kind of going through adolescence in their 30s.
Mm-hmm.
And so really normalizing like this is a developmental stage that you didn't get to have. You're having it now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so some psycho ed around that. Talking about intuitive eating, I have found can be really helpful, like that reconnecting with your body,
Mm-hmm.
and those principles. And even sometimes sex education comes
Yeah.
into it. Like, okay, you never got any sex education. Well, let's talk about this. Like, what are the body parts that exist? What
Mm-hmm.
is their function? How do we take care of them? How do we prevent STIs? What are things that are important to you in making decisions about a sexual relationship so that you're actually making a decision, that you're not feeling forced into anything in any direction?
Yeah.
Um, you
What are
know,
some indications that a client is ready for that kind of like sex ed conversation or
hmm
conversations? Because I imagine like the one person that I scared off, like that versus conversations I had with the other client when she was like, "Oh yeah, I still masturbate a few times a week," and I was like, "Whoa, okay, great," Um, but that conversation didn't happen until we had a really well-established relationship because
hmm
partly because I'd made assumptions about her relationship with masturbation, but she just like volunteered it in the midst of a conversation we were having. But
Yeah,
I could have
yeah.
gotten to that earlier if I just asked the question. So how do you know somebody isn't going to be scared off?
hmm I think a big thing is using our clinical skills to just kind of pay attention to what they're talking about and how they're talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot of times, as the relationship does get stronger in therapy, you'll notice that people may speak about sex a little more freely,
Mm-hmm.
um, or they might say things like, "This could be TMI," which is a
Mm-hmm.
great opportunity to jump in and be like, "There's no such thing as TMI in therapy. Like,
Yeah.
whatever you want to talk about, whatever words you want to use, like, we
Mm-hmm.
can go there." Um, so just as with a lot of things as therapists, staying on that leading edge,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes just asking, like, I notice that it kind of feels like, this sexual topic keeps coming up. Would that be something that you would like to explore further? Um, and giving them the opportunity to even know that's an option.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's possible in that moment they might be like, no. But then later they think about it and they're like, I didn't know we could talk about that. Yes, I
Mm-hmm.
would like to talk about that.
Yeah.
So even putting it out on the table is like, hey, this is an option if at some point it feels comfortable, or appropriate for us to talk about this.
Yeah. I love it when people say the TMI thing because it does give me, like, I always say, like, oh, yeah, there's no such thing as TMI in therapy. Like, in any given week, I may be talking very graphically with someone about sex or hear about some really painful constipation,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll like name the things that my ideal clients might be like too afraid or too embarrassed to ever bring up. It's a great
Mm-hmm.
in for that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Like making sure they know, like, this is an okay thing to talk about.
Hmm.
I'm not going to think you're weird because you brought this up.
Right. Right.
Um, yeah, so I think that's a big one. Weaving in that psycho ed. Um, and then I think trauma treatment can be helpful.
Hmm.
I personally am level 1 trained in both EMDR and brain spotting.
Hmm.
Um, I have personally have found brain spotting to be more helpful with the clients that I work with that are
Hmm.
dealing with like this overlap of diet culture and purity culture.
Hmm.
Um, but I know other folks have had the opposite experience, that EMDR has been more helpful. But being trained in some type of trauma modality
Hmm.
to help folks really process those things um, in a different way, help their brains and their bodies like move move forward from
Hmm.
whatever is feeling stuck.
Yeah. Well, and
That
both
that
brain
can be helpful.
spotting and EMDR are both like body based. It's like they're
Yes.
somatic.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting thinking about like that bottom up being so helpful for people who are like floating heads.
Mm-hmm.
It helps bring the two together.
Yes. But I find that you have to be a little bit slower about bringing
Hmm.
them together sometimes.
Yeah.
Some folks are ready, like they recognize I am completely disconnected from my body and I want to do something about that, so let's go.
Hmm.
Whereas other folks, okay, we need to take this a little bit slower. The idea of connecting with your body is terrifying,
Hmm.
understandably so, and so we're going to move at a pace that is appropriate for you.
Hmm.
Um, and then I've also found that group therapy is really helpful. I enjoy leading groups.
Hmm.
And so, like, I lead a group for folks around reconnecting with your body and, like, understanding diet culture and disowning some of that stuff.
Yeah.
And so I find that's helpful. I also lead a group for folks that have been harmed within their faith, and they're trying to navigate that.
Mhm.
And in both cases, I always have folks say that it was so healing just to not feel as isolated,
Yeah.
to hear that, like, oh, there's other people that their concern may not be exactly what mine is, but there are other people that are also dealing with this, and we
Yes.
can navigate this together.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, that's how a lot of the shunning that happens when you start to question your religion
Mm-hmm.
or you start to leave your religion, um, in some of these high control religious groups, it works to keep people there
It
because it is
does.
so lonely when your entire world has been this one group of people. Yeah, it's
Yes.
heartbreaking. And it takes so much strength to leave and like trust that it will be okay and that you will
Mm-hmm.
be okay.
Yeah. And I think there's almost a type of shunning that happens if you start bucking diet culture.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
if you are
Hmm.
suddenly not participating in oh, it's January and I created these new rules for,
Hmm.
how I'm gonna eat, or my lifestyle plan, or whatever words you use. Or if you're like, I don't really want to talk about my body. I'm
Yeah.
not accepting comments about what I'm eating.
Hmm.
Like, there can be a kind of shunning of like, well, what's your deal? Like,
Yeah.
so I
It's
think both cases can
absolutely.
leave you feeling really isolated.
For sure. For sure. Especially if every previous year you were also like, oh, and here's the one I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the food I'm giving up. And I'm gonna be so good. Like all of that.
Yes.
Um, yeah. And I think with both like that idea of like, I'm gonna be so good, like so well behaved, that we link our goodness to our behaviors,
Mm-hmm.
which are about denying ourselves the things that we
Mm-hmm.
want.
Yes. Back to that morals-based language,
Hmm.
and being set up for it to not work, but you're the one that feels like a failure.
Right. Yeah. Oh, it's so juicy. Like, I mean, there's so much freedom on the other side of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's tough, juicy work.
It is. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for talking about this with us. I feel like I hope that for people who didn't know a lot about either diet or purity culture, they got some real understanding. The people who are already seeing people with the overlap maybe didn't think about that overlap and how similar those two are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or if you're just working with one and you're like, oh wait, diet culture, I see that in so many of my clients. Okay. Then now you've got this whole other area to explore with your clients. So, yeah. Well, thank
Yeah.
you for being here, Michelle. I really appreciate it.
You are welcome. I'm really excited I got to share about this, and I hope it is helpful to some
Yeah,
folks in putting
absolutely.
those pieces together.
For sure. I hope that broadened your clinical horizons. Head over to notboringces.com to get your CE credit. Want to have a not boring conversation with me about your clinical area of expertise? You can apply there too. If you like this conversation, leave us a 5-star review, tell a friend, and be sure to subscribe for future conversations.